Hey guys, welcome to the RAMZPAUL show. It is a beautiful morning in the Ozarks and it is great to be here with you. Thank you for being here. We do the show every Monday through Friday at 11 a.m. Except on Friday, we do it at 8 p.m. Central. Thank you guys for being here. This is user supported and I appreciate any tips that you could give or pay for a cup of coffee type of thing. If you could just send me a super chat on YouTube. Rumble has rants. There's Powerchats here and stream elements. Typically, I go for about an hour. It depends how many questions I get. If I have a lot of interactivity from you guys, I tend to go a little bit longer, but we'll see. I thought I had a great show last night with Z-Man. It was a lot of fun. We talked about Reagan. If you haven't seen it, check it out. It's on YouTube. It's on Rumble. It's on X, so you can watch the replay. And I'm really enjoying our shows that we do every Wednesday night. That's a Wednesday wrap-up. We haven't decided what we're going to do next week, but we like to kind of do a deep dive into a topic. And it's he's got a lot of good insight, so I enjoy that. And again, tomorrow night, I have my show at 8 p.m. It's an open forum show where you can call in with your questions, just like a Rush Limbaugh show. You can call in. And it's great to be here with you guys. So thank you so much. And it is Thursday, March 13th. It's a beautiful day. And I want to thank someone. I won't say his name, but I got a gift from someone, a check at our P.O. box, and I really do appreciate it. He said, this is for making sure you're in the right body. So if whoever you are, thank you very much. I do appreciate this. And I'm going to put out if you want to write me, I haven't done this for a while, so I think I'll put this out here. Just get my P.O. box. We check it pretty much every day. It's in Fayetteville. So thank you very much for your support. And we'll get diving into the news of the day, what is happening. All right. I think the first thing that's the big in the news, Trump, you remember before he was elected, he said he could end the Ukrainian and Russian war within one day. Obviously, that did not happen. It did not end on one day because it's a little bit more complicated. War has a reason, and people go to war because because they go crazy. There's rational reasons. I mean, you could say it's because they're greedy or, they want something they shouldn't have. That's fair, but there's a reason for it. It's just not willy-nilly. And Russia and Ukraine got in a war for reasons that are fairly complex. They really date at least back to 2014, maybe earlier. Sort of a long and complex situation. Basically, Eastern Ukraine is ethnically Russian, meaning the people that live there, although they may be Ukrainian citizens, their nation is Russia. And this is really important because I've talked a lot about this. There's a difference between a country and a nation. A nation are a people that are bound by blood, common ancestry. That's where we get the term like neonatal. Natal is from the Latin natio, which means to give birth. So a nation is people that are related by birth. Like the Japanese people, that's their nation. Now, a country is a political designation. So in Japan is a country for the Japanese people. It doesn't mean everyone that is a Japanese citizen is necessarily of the Japanese ethnicity, but the vast majority are. So that's the distinction. And it causes a lot of problems in the world when we get that mixed up. So no, when Omar comes over from Somalia, because she marries her brother, just because she gets her U.S. citizenship doesn't mean she's an American. She's not part of our nation. She's a citizen, but not part of the nation. And you have this problem around the world and you have it in Ukraine. In Eastern Ukraine, the people that live there, although their citizenship is Ukrainian, their nationality is Russian, at least a vast majority of the people. And the Ukrainians, they don't really like him. And since 2014 coup, which the United States backed with Victoria Nuland, they had a president in Ukraine that was pro-Russia. We didn't like that, so we instigated a coup, one of the Keller revolutions. And we also worked with NGOs like George Soros to do this because we wanted a president of Ukraine that would be more hostile to Russia, because certain elements in our government considered Russia needs to be the enemy because they are a stumbling block to their world vision, like gay sex everywhere, and getting rid of whiteness and Christianity. And they saw Russia as a stumbling block to that. There's other issues too. So there was a coup in 2014, and the people that gained a lot of influence in Ukraine, ironically, a lot of them are very nationalist, meaning they believe the Ukraine should be just for the Ukrainian people, and the people of Russian ethnicity, they need to get the hell out, or they need to be killed, or whatever. Sort of like ethnic cleansing, similar to what Israel's doing in Gaza. They're trying to ethnically cleanse the people out of there. And the Ukrainians wanted to ethnically cleanse the people of the Russian ancestry out of there. For example, they're trying to make illegal the Russian language. They shut down Russian Orthodox churches, and they got into a lot of persecution of the ethnic Russian people, especially in the Donbass region, which is eastern Ukraine, and Odessa. There's a big Russian population. In Odessa, they actually burned some Russians alive. Very gory stuff. So it started a civil war in 2014 between the Donbass militias. They fought against the Ukrainians, and it was a bloody war. There's a lot of negotiations, and the people in the eastern Ukraine were being supported by the Russian government. And then so finally it spilled over in 3 years ago, in February of 2022, I believe it was, that Russia, they invaded Ukraine, and they gave their objectives for the war. And so they tried negotiation. There's a Minsk Accord, Minsk II Accord, and those accords were all broken. I think they were broken by the Ukrainians. And at least the second accord, we had the NATO government officials said, or that, yeah, it was just a ruse. We were just giving Ukraine time to arm. We didn't mean to hold the peace. So Russia's rightfully very skeptical of any peace accord. So they went to war, because war is a type of negotiation. It's the real world. And so they have these objectives. They want these objectives met. They couldn't get the objectives through normal diplomacy, so they conducted war. War is just an extension of diplomacy. That's how you finally get what you want. It becomes down to force. And that's what we've had for the past 3 years. So Trump, I think, was a little naive or whatever. When he came in, he said, this war would have never started if I had been in president. I'm not really sure if that's true. We don't know. But anyway, Trump is right. This was just thrown on his lap when he came into president. He didn't want this war. And it reminded me, I wrote my article today years ago. Not many people remember this because everyone's died off. And I don't even remember LBJ, Lyndon Johnson. He was president once Kennedy was assassinated. And I was alive then, but I don't remember any of this because I was just a really little kid. I went to first grade in 1969. So by the time I was in kindergarten, Nixon had already been elected. So, this is really before I can remember. I didn't obviously follow politics when I was 2 or 3 years old, but LBJ took over from Kennedy. And Kennedy at the time had started to support South Vietnam to help them oppose the Viet Cong and the North Vietnam. North Vietnam was communist. They were backed by the Soviets, sometimes by China. That was a little complex relationship. And then you had the guerrillas in South Vietnam, the Viet Cong. And the Vietnamese government, South Vietnam government, was very corrupt. Sound familiar? Sound familiar? Kind of like Ukraine is. It was a corrupt government, but we thought we needed to back it because we didn't really see it so much as a civil war. In retrospect, it was just a civil war. But we thought this was part of the whole communist plan, to take over the world. And people were really worried about that in the early 60s. I mean, some rightfully so. I mean, the communists did want to try to take over the world. And a lot of people saw, well, if they take South Vietnam, then they will take Laos and maybe Cambodia and Thailand, and then they will eventually take Australia. So they called that the domino theory. And so a lot of people are like, well, Kennedy anyway said, okay, I'll send some Green Berets, like 400 Green Berets he sent. So it wasn't a lot under Kennedy to help train the South Vietnamese army. They were pretty inept, but he was trying to help to train them. And we had advisors over there. We had CIA type people and, did their usual dirty tricks and so forth. But it was under Kennedy, the war was going on, but it was kind of, from an American point of view, it was very similar to the way it is now with Ukraine, where we didn't really have much involvement there. We had a few Green Berets, but we didn't have Marines or Army or anything like that. And Kennedy was assassinated. And Johnson didn't really want this war. He just wanted to get out of it. But it was, okay, well, how did we get out of this? Even though we weren't totally in it, we were just supplying weapons and intelligence. Again, sounds familiar. And advisors in Vietnam. And then what happened, there was the Gulf of Tonkin incident. One of our espionage ships was fired upon, torpedoed. I think it was called the Maddox. A lot of it turned out to be a hoax, but it really upset the United States, and Congress provided funding to defend ourselves against the North Vietnamese. And so Johnson ordered a attack on North Vietnam with an air attack. So again, it escalated. It went from just advisors to military support to actually we got involved because they attacked one of our ships. And then the Viet Cong in one of our Green Beret bases, they attacked it. And Johnson responded by putting troops in Vietnam, first Marines. And first is like 40,000. Then in a year was like 100,000. We got over 500,000 men there. And then the rest is history. But the point is, Johnson never planned for that. It was like, let's get the hell out of here. But he kind of got stuck. It fell on his lap, the war. And he was, well, what do I do? If I try to get out of this, I will look weak. So let's say if Johnson said, this isn't the business of the United States. We're not going to get our boys in this mess. And he just pulled the Green Berets out, cut off funding to South Vietnam. South Vietnam would have fell, which it did eventually anyway. And Johnson, LBJ was worried he would be looked at as being soft on communism and, a appeaser and weak. Sound familiar? Sound familiar. We're seeing the exact same thing here that Trump is starting to worry about. So Trump doesn't want this war with Ukraine whatsoever. And when he started his administration, I thought he went a really good path. He was just saying, hey, we can't fund this war forever. You guys need to make a peace, Ukraine. You're losing the war. You can't really dictate the terms. You gotta really compromise here. But we're getting out of this one way or the other. And I supported that. I think that was a smart thing to do. Wash our hands of it. Trump could say this was not my war. This happened under Biden is when it started. And really the whole mess started under Obama with Victoria Nuland. I don't want a part of this. And yeah, certain people would have screamed that Russia, Trump is a Putin agent and weak on Russia and all that bullshit. But, in 6 months, everyone forgets. People move on to the next thing. I think that's what Trump should have done. But now, Trump, like LBJ, he's got an ego. He doesn't want to appear to be, the president that lost the war in Ukraine. So he's trying to negotiate this peace. And he got kind of suckered because initially, when he had his fight with Zelensky and he just cut off aid to Ukraine, I was like, good, that should be permanent. Let's get the hell out of here. But that's not what happened. Instead, we met with Ukrainian officials in Saudi Arabia, and there was a lot of negotiations. And part of the end of the negotiations, Ukraine agreed to a ceasefire for 30 days with Russia. And in return to agreeing for the ceasefire, Trump got suckered into giving Ukraine back weapons and military aid and intelligence. Again, kind of like the Vietnam thing. So it'd be like giving all this support again. And so he got suckered into this. He said, no, we're not giving any more aid. Those days are over. But he did. And so we're back to where we were under the Biden regime. So we haven't ended the war on day one. And we haven't even cut off the funding of the war. But we're still funding it now as of yesterday, because Ukraine agreed to do a ceasefire, which Russia won't do. Because what's the point of this ceasefire in Russia's point of view? It doesn't really solve the whole issues that started the war. And they've had previous ceasefires where Ukraine just uses it to rearm, to regroup the army. And Ukraine right now is somewhat in disarray, the military, at least in the Kursk region. That was part of Russia that Ukraine invaded for PR reasons. They were hoping it would topple Putin and all that, but their offensive got kind of stalled in Kursk. They launched this offensive in August, I think, of 2024. And they were trying to get a nuclear power plant, but they didn't get there, and they got stalled, and they kind of got stuck there. And it's just been a lot of attrition since August. And they've had their best troops there and best supply troops, the Ukrainians. And they've been kind of taking a lot of casualties. It's a horrible war. Trump is right about that. And then what has happened last week or earlier this week, Russia, they did a attack on Ukraine in that region. And it was really, in some ways, a brilliant attack in the sense, like, part of what caused Ukraine to really just crumble. The Russians, they figured out there's this old gas pipeline that was sending gas to Europe. Zelensky shut that down in January. And Russia, they thought, well, wait a minute, what if we just, get all the gas out of there, pump it full of oxygen, and we'll send special forces through this gas pipeline and pop up, kind of like Mario Brothers, behind the Ukrainians. It was a bold strategy. It was brilliant. I hope they make a movie about it. And, the pipeline, you could get a man through, but you can't walk upright. It's only like 4 feet in diameter. So you got to kind of crawl. And it was like they had to go like 8-9 miles, just like in a crawling position with a rifle, pack, gear. Incredible. But they did it, and they popped out behind the Ukrainians, behind their lines, a couple hundred men, special forces. And that sent the Ukrainians obviously into a panic because they didn't understand what was going on. And I don't blame them. You think you know where all the troops are. Your flanks are protected. If one of your flanks starts to fail, the idea is you get communication like, hey, our flank is failing over here. We either need to send reinforcements or we got to pull back so we don't get cut off. But you don't expect just out of the blue a bunch of Russians to be behind you. And they were probably really confused. What the hell happened? There's probably a debate. Is this real or people panicking? And it was real. And the whole Ukrainian defense just fell apart. It wasn't a controlled retreat. It was, in military terms, a rout. Soldiers just threw down their weapons and they ran as fast as they could, trying to get out. A lot of them were killed. They abandoned their equipment. Remember the Abrams tanks we gave Ukraine? The game changers. They left them. In fact, Russia has them now because they abandoned them and just ran. They panicked. And these were Ukrainians' best troops. And, I don't know if I blame them that much. When you get surrounded like that, things get really tough. So that's the situation now. So Ukraine has been kicked out of Kursk. It was a major defeat of the war. They've had other defeats in the war too, Ukraine, like Mariupol, Bakhmut, and so forth. Those were slow, grinding battles. This was a spectacular collapse based on a tactic the Russians used. And they just chaotically left the Kursk region. Now the question is, as I talk right this moment on March 11th, is 13th. Is Russia going to try to regroup, take Kursk and try to regroup there? Or are they going to follow the Ukrainians? I think it's called the Sunni district. Or are they going to go into Ukraine now because the Ukrainians are in disarray up there? So as you can see, I bring this all up. There's no reason for the Russians to agree to a ceasefire. I'm sure Ukraine would like it because they could try to reorganize their disorganized troops up in the north. But there's no advantage for Russia to have a ceasefire. And as Russia has said, which is true, typically you don't do a ceasefire until you get an initial agreement. You don't have to have a ceasefire and then do agreements. It doesn't usually work that way. It didn't work that way in Vietnam or in Korea. We've had negotiations while the war raged on. And you typically have a ceasefire when you have a basic understanding of an agreement. And then you have a ceasefire, see if it holds the agreement. But you just don't have the ceasefire beforehand. That's very unusual. And so I figured that the Russians want to do this. Now, the Ukrainians are happy in Western Europe because they all repeated a phrase. The ball's in Putin's court. And they all said that exact same phrase. Everything in our politics is astroturfed, is written by people, and they sent out the memo, what talking points to say. So what they're trying to do is sucker the United States into this war, and Trump, again, like LBJ, saying, whereas Russia responded today. Well, let me show you Russia's response. And this wasn't surprising. Okay, let me just bring this up here. Russia delivers main ceasefire demands to U.S. So Russia responded. They were like, well, okay, but before we're going to have a ceasefire, Russia's basically saying we want our conditions that we had beforehand, that we started the war. Number one, no NATO membership for Ukraine. Well, that's an easy one because Trump has already said NATO's not going to accept Ukraine. And so I don't think that's going to happen. So that's an easy one. No NATO peacekeepers, and that's in quote, in Ukraine. This is Macron, France, and Starmer, Britain. They had these wacky ideas of putting so-called peacekeepers, meaning NATO troops, and potentially U.S. troops, again, like Vietnam, into Ukraine to hold the peace. And what it would do, it'd be like a security guarantee. If they should be attacked by the Russians, then that would obligate us to get into the war and send our troops into Ukraine. Again, what's similar to what happened to LBJ with the Gulf of Tonkin. They want a Gulf of Tonkin incident in this war that will draw the American troops into Ukraine. That's what they're attempting there. Ukraine is denazified and demilitarized. Denazified, this is a kind of a, what do they mean by Nazis? There are no Nazis since 1945. What they mean are these what they call Nazis are these nationalists in Ukraine that, and I'm a nationalist, but they believe they should just ethnically cleanse the Russians out of Ukrainian territory and so forth. And they said those people need to go. And I think that means also Zelensky needs to go. They don't consider him legitimate. And demilitarized, so this means that the Ukrainian army basically has got to be, they could have like maybe a small force. This happens a lot after World War I and so forth, where you can only have a token force. And so the Ukrainian military will have to disarm primarily. And then the 4 Donbass regions, again, those are eastern Ukraine. They're considered part of Russia now based on, they declared their independence. They had a referendum. They voted the people to become part of Russia. They want to keep those. Ukraine considers those territories their territories. They consider those occupied territories. And Crimea, Russia's had a long time. So that's basically the goals at the start of the war. So Russia said if you meet these 4 conditions, then we will have more than a ceasefire. There won't be the war anymore. The war's over, and there'll be peace and stability for Ukraine. So notice in this, Russia's not demanding to have all of Ukraine So these people that were crazy saying, oh, Putin wants to conquer all of Ukraine, even at the very beginning, and the Russian people I've known that used to live in that country. I have a girl that follows me. She was born in Ukraine. She's ethnically Russian. And she told me long ago that Russia doesn't want Western Ukraine. That'd be just a big issue. They don't want that at all. So they don't want Kiev or Western Ukraine, but they do want Eastern Ukraine because they consider that rightfully Russian. So there is no demand to take all of Ukraine. There's no idea of taking Germany or France or anything like that. It's just this area of Ukraine they consider theirs. So that is interesting for that. So Russia's basically saying, yeah, we'll do a ceasefire. We'll do more than a ceasefire. We'll just have a permanent peace if you meet these demands. But Ukraine won't agree to these demands. And, well, we're back where we were, right? Back where we started from. That's why we're having the war. And I don't know if Trump understands this, but this is it. And so Trump, what do you want to do? Keep funding Ukraine forever? Even if we fund Ukraine forever, Ukraine does not have a pathway to victory just by us giving them weapons, because Ukrainians are running out of men. And it's mostly men that fight, not so much women. And the men that fight are more young men, and they're pretty much all dead now. And the ones that they're bringing up to the front now, they're not really that motivated. They've been drafted. They don't want to be there. And those type of people tend to surrender quicker, and they're not willing to fight to the death. So the army's not as effective. I think Ukraine's already in that state. So it's just a matter, forget about the weapons issue. And the weapons issue, we only have so much weapons to give to, and we can't make them like that. We've deindustrialized ourselves. Europe has deindustrialized. We have we have our best little friend in the Middle East we got to give weapons to. We still have to worry about China. So we just can't deplete all our weapons and give them to Ukraine. So, but even if we could, let's just say if we had all the unlimited weapons to Ukraine, which we don't. And we don't have the money anymore. We're in financial problems in this country. But even if we were, really wealthy with unlimited weapons, Ukraine still couldn't win because they just they lack the men. It's a war of attrition. The Russians have the advantage. And it's, I've often referred to, if you've ever played the game of chess, if you get the material advantage on your opponent, then you can just start swapping pieces. I'll use my knight, take your bishop. And even though you take my knight, then fine trade, because I'm ahead with material. And if we keep trading like that, eventually you're pretty much out of pieces. I have some pawns left. I'll get the pawns to the end, promote them to queen, and game over. And that's kind of the way the Russians are playing this. They have the material advantage with men. So even if they just swap, even if the casualties are equal, and they're not, Ukraine's, I think, taking more, but even if they were equal, it wouldn't matter. Russia is going to win. So there is no path to victory. Russia can take all of Ukraine if they wanted to. It'll take a while, but they can do it. So by giving Ukraine weapons and money, we're just prolonging a losing cause. It's a lost cause. The only way potentially Ukraine could win, and Zelensky knows this, and these crazy people in Europe know it, is if we started World War III. And that's even an if. I don't even know if we would win then. Because again, Ukraine logistically is right near Russia. We would have the problem of trying to get troops over there and supplies over there. And then I don't think the American people would support another Vietnam where thousands of American boys are dying for, gay pride parades in Kiev. It would be an extremely unpopular war. Europe doesn't have the human capital to do it anymore. So a world war, I guess you go nuclear war or something crazy like that, but that could destroy everyone. And so that's really off the table. So there is no path there. There is checkmate. There is no path unless we're willing to send our boys to die there, which I don't think Trump wants to do. Hope not. Hope he doesn't go the LBJ route. That's what LBJ did. Because remember, before LBJ, there wasn't many troops in Vietnam. It was LBJ that really escalated the war. He didn't start the war. Kennedy was one that more started it, but start it. He put advisors over there, but LBJ really escalated it. And that's what they hope. They're hoping that we'll just send troops over as advisors or as peacekeepers, and then there'll be an incident that will be blamed on Russia, even a false flag, kind of like the Gulf of Tonkin probably was. And then we can use that as an excuse to get into a real war with Russia. I don't want this. It's not good for the world, but this is the path we're going down. And so the whole idea of the ceasefire doesn't seem very realistic, is that this is really going to happen. And let's see here. The problem is now is even Ukraine, I mean, we're at a stalemate here. So, and again, I like Trump, but I think sometimes he overestimates his ability. I mean, there's real reasons for the war. It's just not they just randomly decided to get into the war. Let me just show you here. Ukraine, Zelensky is demanding Russia will have to retreat from all Ukrainian territory, including Crimea, as a condition of any peace deal. Well, that's not going to happen. I mean, Crimea is historically Russia. They're not going to give up territory. Russia's not going to give up eastern Ukraine. They consider that their territory. Officially in Russia, it's their territory now. They had a referendum. The people voted to join Russia. It'd be like if someone said, "Oh, Alaska's not really yours." Russia's never going to budge on that. So basically, the problem now we haven't really made any progress. We have Russia saying, okay, we'll agree to, if you want to call it a ceasefire, fine, we'll call it just a lasting peace. If you agree to all our demands, this is we want to win. So if you basically agree to surrender and give in to all our demands we had at the beginning of the war, yeah, we'll go along with that. And Ukraine, they're not budging. They're like, okay, yeah, we're willing to have a peace agreement if Russia gives up Crimea and all of the eastern territories, and we still get to keep our military and, hey, maybe get into NATO. Obviously, there's been no progress on either side there. And in negotiations, sometimes you get people you have to each give up a little bit. I understand that. But negotiations are always based upon where the country stands in the battlefield determines a lot of the negotiations. Meaning if you're winning, you're in a stronger position than if you're losing. If you're losing, you really can't make many demands. You pretty much have to give in to whatever. That's how Germany was in World War I. When they signed the peace treaty, they had to give in a lot because they had a revolution. It was they were in a whole mess there. And they had to give in to the Allies, the Versailles Treaty, and they had to pay damages. They lost some territory that was previously German, ethnically German in France. So it was a bitter agreement, but they had to do that. And so there's no incentive. So basically, what Zelensky saying, yeah, I'll agree to a ceasefire, but the agreement's going to have to be Russia has to give up everything and declare defeat. I mean, it's just insane. So the whole thing is just really stupid. There's just almost no compromise right here that will happen. And let me just show you guys this here too. All right. The Russian army has liberated all these areas in Russia. So this is a cursed region. And again, they started this in August of 2023. They invaded this area and Russia has totally recaptured it. So, and Zelensky was hoping to use this area as kind of a trade. Like, okay, we'll give you back this part of Russia, but you have to give us back Crimea and the eastern Ukraine. And Russia just had a big victory there, so they don't have to swap anything back. So I'm not really optimistic at a quick peace happening now. And sadly, I hope someone in the administration like J.D. Vance or other people that listen to people like us will understand the danger Trump's getting us into. And partly could be his ego. And again, it's like LBJ. LBJ said once, I don't want to be considered the first guy president to lose a war. LBJ said that, even though he knew it was stupid. And there's a lot of egos here, and Trump needs to wash his hands of this. If he stays invested in this and we keep pissing away money in Ukraine, it's just money down the drain because they're going to lose anyway. And we risk a wider war, and we won't have better relations with Russia. I'd rather see us, remove the sanctions. Let's start trading again with Russia. Let's boom the economy. That's what Trump needs to focus on. And he needs to stop worrying about what these European bitches cry about, or even people that already hate him. They're going to hate him no matter what. He's got to do what's right, not trying to appease these Europeans by acting like the tough guy. So that is where we are right now. All right, we'll get some foreign stuff here and go over some other foreign stories here. And thank you guys for being here. And if you enjoy the show, there's rants. You can give rants, and I got one from Rowhouse. Thank you. Rams, this is happening with Jared Taylor now. Your thoughts on the video? All right, let's take a look at this here. I think I had this in prep, and thank you for this. Jared Taylor's a great man. He's of American Renaissance. I've been to many conferences of his. I've spoke to him. I was on the last conference where Anthony Cumia was there. And Jared Taylor's just a very reasonable man. He's for wide interest. That's his point. He's not a neo-Nazi or anything like that. He's a very kind man. He's a very genuine man. And he's very hated because of that. So let's just take a look here, and we'll go over this. So thank you for sending this. All right.
A student club at CMU has invited a controversial figure to speak on campus. The Western Culture Club has invited Jared Taylor. Taylor is the head of American Renaissance, founded in 1990. Their website describes their mission as commentary on interracial crime, race differences, including white advocacy, and anti-white racism.
That sounds fair, right? We have how many Jewish groups? ADL is dedicated to that for Jews. You have millions of black groups, Hispanic group, Asian groups. I see nothing wrong someone advocating for white interest. We've just been taught, and we got to get over this, that somehow it is wrong for us to advocate for our people, but all other groups can advocate for their people. But white people are especially evil, and we're not allowed to do that. And we got to drop that. And part of the college experience should be to get different ideas in there. And you don't have to listen to Jared Taylor, but you're free to do so if you wish. So they extended the invitation for him to speak. I would think if you're a leftist and you're sincere about these questions, and you think you've been raised since kindergarten with critical race theory, taught how evil white people are and so forth, I would just encourage you with this one thing I would say about Jared Taylor. If you're respectful to him, he will allow you to ask really tough questions. He really will. So bring your best questions to him. And knowing Jared, he'd be happy to, whatever you want to say. I mean, again, be respectful, but just say whatever you want. Give your best argument why he's wrong. Tell him based on evidence or other things why he is wrong, his position, and have the back and forth. And Jared's really good at that, and he likes that. And by the way, that's supposed to be historically what universities were about, were an exchange of ideas. And I think that's very positive. And if you're so fragile that you don't want to experience that, I would say at that point, you're not really you shouldn't be in the university. You're in a cult then, right? Because if you're a cult, people in the cults, they don't want to hear outside opinions. They just have their beliefs and they want to be sheltered from other opinions. But if you don't want to be in a woke cult, but you actually want to interact with people, I would recommend doing this. But again, you don't have to go. All right.
The Western Culture Club says this event will be beneficial for CMU and says it's a good opportunity for the school to exercise its right to free speech. But the invitation hasn't sat well with some of the student body who have called Taylor a white supremacist because of his views.
Well, even if he was a white supremacist, I don't even know what that means, but that should be irrelevant. Go debate him on that.
Speaking for other people of color on campus, if this school is struggling enough as is to bring other people of culture and inclusivity to this school, and when you bring somebody like this on campus, it's completely destroying everything that you're trying to build.
Well, what you're trying to build that white people aren't able to advocate for themselves. Is that it? But she, I'm sure, is part of a black club, is allowed to advocate. She looks like a clown with that orange hair. But I guess, is that what they're trying to do?
The president of CMU also releasing a statement, and while he's not a fan of Taylor, he calls it a free speech issue. John Marshall says, quote, "My hope for you is that you're able to carefully listen and critically examine his arguments, and that you come to see the vileness of his views."
Well, what vileness of his views? What's vile about his views? I've listened to Jared Taylor a long time. I don't hear anything that's vile at all. In fact, Jared Taylor's not even a white nationalist. If you actually listen to his views, people asked him that, he doesn't even support that. So what he just supports the rights of white people. And that should not be controversial. You can support the rights of every other race, but somehow, in some cases you're required, like in America now, we're required to support Jewish self-determination. So we are required to support the Jewish ethno-state. And at least if you're a foreign student, you protest Jews in Israel ethnically cleansing people out of not even their territory. If you protest that, we're not going to tolerate that, right? So there's an example. Not only do we support ethnic identity with other groups, but we support them actually engaging in ethnic cleansing, and you better not criticize it. Jared doesn't even go that far. He doesn't support ethnic cleansing. He just supports white people should have the same rights as any other group. Really, that's all it comes down to, Jared Taylor.
It's the opportunity of your life to peacefully and respectfully demonstrate kindness, goodness, and to carefully deconstruct his dehumanizing ideas, end quote. To see Marshall's full statement, head to...
Yeah, I mean, he's got to say that. I don't really mind the so much. I encourage people to go there, though he had to put this vileness and dehumanizing, probably so he won't get into trouble. But I've heard nothing. If you think is vile, explain exactly what is vile that Jared Taylor says and what is dehumanizing. I've never heard any of that sort of thing. He respects the right of all people to live. Hell, he's Japanese, right? He was born in Japan. So he's been to a lot of other cultures. He respects other cultures. I don't think he has a problem with other cultures. It was interesting because even at American Renaissance, supposedly a white supremacist conference. Well, I was there once. There was a black woman there. Jewish people attend every year there. Hispanics have attended. There's Asians that attend there. You could say, well, he's cucked. He shouldn't allow that, but he does. So very strange white supremacist conference. His point of view is almost like say like the ADL would say, hey, we advocate Jewish causes and we welcome people that aren't Jews to help support us, or blacks are the same way. Yeah, we're all about black identity, but we're welcome to have allies. I think Jared Taylor's the same way. If other people of other races want to be allies with us, I think that's a good thing. A lot of people of even other races, they would prefer America to remain majority white because they understand what it'd be like. It'd be bad for them if it wasn't majority white. So I encourage people to go talk to him, and he's a very good speaker, and Jared Taylor is a very kind man, a very intelligent man, and he is exactly what you see off camera. Some people are different off camera than on camera, but Jared Taylor's not that. He's a very down-to-earth person, even though he's a Yale graduate, very intelligent, always very civil, a lot more civil than I am or a lot of other people. So I would encourage that. Thank you, Rojas. And if you guys have any other questions or comments, there's Power Chats and Super Chats. I really do appreciate it. And let's see here. Let's see what else we have in the news today. We'll go do some more Yeah, let's see. Should I do domestic stuff here? Yeah, we'll do some of the domestic items that's happening here. One of the problems we're going to really have to shake out here with our republic is we put these biddies into positions as judges, and they don't act really as judges. The judges are just a rule if something is based on the Constitution. They're not to legislate. But we have these people. I'm sure she's for trans rights, BLM, abortion. It's probably her. Just by looking at her face, I know all her positions. But a Biden-appointed Trump-hating judge demands that the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, bow to woke ideology and retract his ex-post. She explained that the Department of Justice that spends millions on Viagra, so it must spend millions more to help male soldiers become female. So this is, we don't want to offer sex change surgery to soldiers. It's just so crazy I'm even talking about this. And she's saying, no, you have to offer it. Yeah, well, fuck you, bitch. I hope Trump ignores these orders. These people aren't legitimate. They can't overrule the president. And this is what has to happen. I think we should remove most of the female judges permanently. I don't think this is working very well. The experiment hasn't worked. Years ago, they were all male. And all they do is they just go based on their emotions. They don't base it on law. And it's a mess. And we're not going to have a republic if we're beholden to these witches. So I would just ignore the order, and it needs to happen. It does need to happen. All right, let's see some politics. I guess Chuck Schumer, he's the one that Trump said is not really Jewish because he doesn't support Israel enough. It's kind of funny. But anyway, he's just announced that the Democrats are going to block the continuing resolution bills. Thomas Massey was opposed to the CR too. A CR, in case you guys don't understand what that is if you don't get a budget through, it's just like, well, we'll just continue with the old budget until we get the new budget. It's a continuing resolution. They happen all the time. And there's always a threat of a government shutdown, which I want to give a shit. But this is a way they play politics. So let's just take a look at this here.
Republicans are marching America to a painful government shutdown.
And see, when the Republicans, they were opposed sometimes to a continuing resolution because of like the Biden bill or whatever. And it shows how the Democrats reacted then.
But we need traditional Republicans to break with MAGA extremists so we can keep the government open.
Republican shutdown will cost 6,306 of her constituents their paychecks.
Put the bill on the floor for an up or down vote so we can end this MAGA Republican nightmare. And if you don't, you own this government shutdown.
And we could put the threat of a shutdown behind us. Our agreement would keep the government open, provide emergency aid for communities battered by hurricanes and other natural disasters.
It's about the harm that House Republicans will do to the American people if the government shuts down.
One Democrat said to me they feel like they have a mandate from their constituents to shut down the government.
There are some raising the possibility of shutting down the government in March.
We will use whatever power we have, and fundamentally, we're not going to vote for something that undermines the American people.
To withhold votes, do Democrats have the stomach?
I certainly hope so. I know that I'm not going to vote for their proposal for sure.
Are you prepared to shut down the government, to join Democratic colleagues who want to stand in the way of keeping the government open?
Well, there are simply trying
yes?
So yes, look, if we have to take steps.
14 days from now, government shutdown is looming.
If we don't believe that we have a willing partner on the other side, then we need to stay united and not bail out President Trump.
And yet, at the same time, in order for a lot of voters to fully understand what Elon Musk and Donald Trump are doing, people are unfortunately going to have to feel some of that. And the only way that that happens is if the shutdown happens.
Republican.
So the Democrats, this is just showing obviously their hypocrisy. They were against Republicans trying to oppose a continuing resolution that would have shut down the government. And again, unfortunately doesn't shut down all the government, just parts of it. I don't really care. They shut it down permanently. But that's not what they're, obviously they say, oh, that's horrible for the Republicans to try and do that. Now, when the Republicans are in power, the Democrats think this is a good thing to do. So, yeah, it's hypocrisy. It's how they play it's how they play it. And one of the things that has become very strange in our world is how politicians, not only in the United States, but the rest of the world, they're more of like actors than real people that think on their own and develop their own policy. You would think like they would analyze the issue. I mean, they would share beliefs with other people, no doubt. That's always been the case. But they'd look at the issue and they would sit down and write out a reply. Before social media, they'd write it out in a letter or whatever, but they would write it themselves. That no longer happens. They're mostly just pawns now. And they read from a script. It's like they're plagiarizing, but they're really stupid. You would think they would get the boilerplate script and people say, okay, we're giving you this boilerplate to talk about, but change it up a little bit so it looks like it's legitimate. But they're lazy. The people we have now, they're stupid and they're lazy, and they don't even bother to change it up. And let me just show you one example of this that we're seeing happening now. And let me bring this up here. About 50 Democrats just posted the exact same talking points, word for word. And this is all these Democrats. They all have posted the same thing. If you look at this, we'll go slowly here. So this is it. They're saying the exact same words about the whole where they're trying to shut down the Democrats. And they're saying the exact same thing, the exact same verbiage. So they didn't change this at all. So something they didn't even come up with. Someone, it'd be interesting to determine who it was they put out the script, they sent it to the congressman, and they told the congressman to say the exact same thing. So that is crazy. But that just shows where we are in the government and how they're more actors and actresses than they are real politicians. They're not really leaders. We are supposed to elect people in Congress to lead us and take the initiative, but these are just whores for the most part. They get paid off and they do what they're told, and they don't even hide it anymore. So they're whores, they get money, and they get a script, and they're like, okay, bitch, read this exactly. Okay, yes, massa. I'll do what you say. You're paying the bill. That's what they do. It's really pathetic, but there's no other way to... You would think that someone would say, well, don't put it word for word. I mean, try to make it look like you came up with it, even though you're a dumb shit, can't write. But nope, that's not what happens. All right, a couple other things here. Let's see, Trump here. Breaking, Trump administration is pushing to eliminate taxes for individuals earning less than $150,000 per year. Well, that would be nice. I would be definitely in that bracket, so I'd have no taxes. Excellent. I would definitely support this. But excuse me for being just a little cynical. I mean, why doesn't Trump promise me a pony? I want a pony. Give everyone a pony and a new car. Trump can say all this stuff. That's nice, but the tricky part is it's got to go through Congress. It's got to be passed. And remember, he did no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime, and no tax on now if you make under $150,000 a year. Although I think this would cover most people. So if you're getting tips, although some waiters can make good money. Some waiters make over $100,000 a year, but I don't think many make over $150,000. So this would probably include them and most people. And Social Security, I don't think you make over $150,000 a year. I don't know. So I think this would include most things. And this is all good. I would support this. But at this point, I'm like, well, okay, you're just throwing shit out there. How is this progressing through Congress? Do you have this in a bill? Is this in the current budget bill coming up? And who's supporting this? That's what I want to see. Right now, I get a little cynical just throwing out all these wild ideas, which could be good, but if they don't go anywhere, what's the point, right? It's kind of, build the wall. Never happens. Then, I want to eliminate income tax. Well, I want a lot of things too. I mean, that's nice, but so I mean, what's he going to? I'm gonna give every incel a Ukrainian woman. Well, okay, but I mean, is this really going to happen? So he's saying a lot of stuff, and while I don't know, to me, I just don't get as excited about it anymore until it really starts to be real. Maybe I'm a little cynical, and I like Trump. Don't get me wrong. But he's throwing out all this shit that is like, okay, you threw out all this stuff, but where are we with this exactly, right? I mean, you said all this stuff, and his mouth says stuff that he can't cash. He can't follow through with it, and we see that a lot with Trump. He talks big, but he doesn't follow through. Like, when I'm day one, I'll end the war in Ukraine. I'm like, really? Well, that's amazing. Hasn't happened. In fact, looks like we may be stuck in it. And then all this stuff. Well, okay, this sounds good. Where is it? I'm still having to pay. So what is it? I mean, yeah, you can tell me your wishes. What are you doing concrete? And don't get me wrong, there's been concrete things. He's fixed the border. Great. But how's the deportations going? I thought we're going to have mass deportations. I haven't heard much of that. Maybe they're happening. I haven't heard of that. What happened with that? It seems like to be forgotten. Trump seems a little scattered at times. He says stuff, and a lot of it's good, but then nothing happens. You got to follow through. Just saying stuff doesn't mean anything. So no taxes if you make under 150,000 a year. I would support, but it's hard for me to jump up and down if it's not going to be real, right? I want a real plan. How is this getting through Congress? When is it getting through? When can I expect not paying taxes? Is it this year? Can I not pay taxes this year? When is this exactly? Is there a bill? Where is it in the Congress? Is it in a committee? Do you have the votes lined up? Because you're going to need, I guess, we have Republicans. We got a lot of cucky Republicans. Are they on board? Where is this? You're just saying wild stuff. I'm getting a little cynical about, honestly. It's just, I mean, it's cute, but it gets a little bit tiresome after a while. Let's see here. The other stuff that was happening. AOC is always good for comic relief. And she got in trouble because she decided to use government funds to expense her dance classes. It's like when you're in a business, you guys ever work for a business? I was in the business world for 30 years. When you travel, you get an expense report. But you just can't write everything off. People write, you an expense report, your meals and everything. And there's some other things you can expense too. But I don't think you could just put on your expense report dance classes. And that's what she did. She actually had you guys pay for her dance classes. And she's going to have to pay it back, I guess. So this is the little thing, but this is an entitlement these people in government get, that you as a taxpayer should have to pay for her dance classes. And so she had an ethics violation there. I'm not really that surprised about that. That is where we are, though. All right. Trump did talk about, we'll do some of the woke stuff since we're talking about AOC. It's good to have you guys all here. And thank you, Rowhouse, for the rant. I always love rants. And here we go. Here's Trump on the whole transgender things.
And they should not, and they're also demeaning women. But who would want these things? And everything's transgender. Everybody transgender. That's all you hear about. Now, that's why we won the election in record numbers. But very importantly, now it is what it is. The Democrats should get with us and come up with good tax policy.
Yeah, Trump's right. The whole transgender thing, it was just crazy. and it's not what the American people want. It was a bridge too far. We can't pretend that a man wearing a dress is a woman, and that's not what they were trying to do. But it wasn't buying. The American people weren't buying it. All right, I guess I have a competition. There is a podcaster out there. And this just shows how a lot of the Democrats are astroturf when you actually look at the popularity. Michelle Obama, she has a new podcast. It was heavily promoted in all the news. And in 14 hours, she got 12,000 views. I mean, and she was heavily promoted, and she only got 12,000 views in basically a day. So, yeah, it wasn't very popular. People don't really give a shit what she has to say. And they were talking about her being a presidential candidate. That was crazy, though. So, let's see here. Let's see. A couple other things. I heard this. Sasha told me about this on Joe Rogan. I didn't think, well, is this real? But it looks like there is a lawsuit coming out about it. And it's pretty bad, but this is, let me show you. This has to do, have you guys heard about the Girl Scout cookies? Girl Scouts are facing a lawsuit after a study reportedly detected heavy metals and pesticides in 100% of the sampled cookies. Yeah, this doesn't sound good. I heard this. I'm like, is this true? Is there pesticides and heavy metals in Girl Scout cookies? I'm not a fan of buying Girl Scout cookies, not because the cookies are bad, but the Girl Scouts, they turned into this woke, like, lesbian organization. It's not like it used to be. It's like the Boy Scouts used to be a great organization, and the whole LGBTQ community took it over and all the abuse that happened there. But yeah, that's pretty shocking if that's what happened. So let's see here. I think I got all the questions. So got one from Rowhouse today. Thank you very much on that. And we'll wrap up early today. We'll keep it at an hour today. And tomorrow, as a reminder, we have the show in the evening. It's a lot of fun at 8 p.m. Central. So I'll see you guys tomorrow night. Thank you guys for being here, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.